In the English tradition, we've held on to the word film to designate really any feature that's screened or projected in a cinema, never having any truck with movies. The word is a hangover because really, what proportion of the films, scare quotes, you've ever seen have been projected on film stock, light passing through celluloid? Very few, I should think. It's at risk, rare, uncommon, difficult to screen. And it's with this in mind that the BFI has just capped off a 4-day festival celebrating all things film, by which they mean 35mm prints, 16mm prints, projection booths return to their glory, and vitally...
NITRATE.
For the first time, in 10 years, a screening of NITRATE prints. We'll get to those. Today, we're here to discuss the ins and outs of the Film on Film Festival, the light leaks and fuzz and grain and scratches, and yes, the vibrant pop of film, treacherous temperatures, a few pints of cider, shorts weather, as ever, a good time to disappear into the chthonic underbelly of NFT1. And there were hiccups, we'll get to those. Nothing goes smoothly in the world of unpredictable stock. Rouben Baker, head creator at the BFI National Archive, is bullish for this medium, explaining in the show notes how print can feel more relatable, more unpredictable. But what's pearlescent and strange and lustrous to us was really the norm for generations of spectators, right back to the tents and Odeons and cinematheques that at the turn of the last century would screen all the latest from Pathé and Gaumont. A few soutons rattling in your pocket, straw hat pulled to a jaunty angle, or a flat cap, I suppose. A little Méliès in the afternoon. What's rare to us, to me, was ordinary to cinema goers 70 years ago, 100 years ago. You know, in London at least, it's quite normal to walk down a high street, any high street, and see the unmistakable envelopes of these old modernist cinemas, frequently converted now into gospel churches. And there's a not insignificant correlation between projected light and enthusiastic religion, in my opinion. I think of Jean-Louis Scheffer, the French film philosopher, who spoke to the inchoate, sublime experience of watching a film, and he wasn't talking about DVD, no. How it addresses itself to our interior history, to an invisible chamber within us, an unexpressed part of ourselves, beyond our actual consciousness. Highfalutin words, perhaps, but is there something there in the grain? The pooling of trapped light released before our eyes. Did you feel holy, Ralph?
Yes, frequently actually. So the BFI Film on Film Festival is a new venture for the BFI.
Inaugural, yeah.
It's the inaugural BFI Film on Film event. I don't think it will run at the exact same time next year, but there has been quite a lot of positive feedback, and so I think there is a plan to...
make this a regular feature, not a bug.
Yeah, to do it again. It's interesting because film is not completely dead in terms of its exhibition in London, at least. And there are various kind of clubs and nights in various cinemas across the UK that show 16mm and 35mm prints of films.
But it's very much the domain of the hobbyist, and in the nicest way possible. I'm speaking as one myself. The neek, it's not the predominant mode that people consume film in the UK is digital.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't have seen a film print.
But also the predominant mode in which people consume film is that they watch Marvel films. I think if you like the Prince Charles Cinema, for instance, I've been going to the Prince Charles Cinema quite a lot for some reason in the last 2 months. I've seen several things there, and most of them have been on film.
Yeah,
that's not most of the stuff they show is on film, but most of the stuff I go to see it on film because they just have a really good celluloid program. They're doing John Cassavetes at the moment. They're showing all his stuff in film. And it is special. I saw Love Streams on film. It was one of my favorite films, and it was a particularly good print. There are various places you can go to hear someone effuse about the beautiful kind of grain and the flicker and all these sorts of things. It's still quite a common experience, but also, I go to at the BFI, sometimes they'll show a film print and I won't really enjoy it that much because it's a really dusty dirty print.
The thing that people kind of valorize and romanticize about film, the flicker and the grain, is sometimes those things aren't inherent to film per se. Like to see a film in, we really want to see everything in as good quality as possible. I saw Godard's. Did I see Passion? Godard's Passion, like at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, at the Institut Français.
Yeah, Institut Français. And the thing with that one was it was a bad quality print anyway. And what it meant is the entire color grade shifts with badly stocked print to a kind of pinky red. It kind of oxidizes towards a pinky red, and it means that's a very visually beautiful, striking film. And you watch it, all of these very rich Baroque colors kind of smeared into sort of taramasalata pink, a little bit like the color of your shirt, Ralph.
Thank you. From Cos.
So it's a nice shirt. And
it was salmon, I think. But taramasalata kind of hits it.
Yeah, and so you're watching a film, you're like, it's on great. It's on film, that's nice, it's special. But you're actually losing a lot of the vibrancy and color that you actually think in that moment, I'd rather be watching this on digital because the transfer would be nicer.
Yeah, I think this is a good point to kind of allude to the fact that we have changed the name of our podcast.
We should mention that.
This will be the first podcast made under our new name, Return to Form.
It's for tax reasons.
So we basically started our podcast. We're going to run through this very quickly because it might not be interesting to everyone. But we started our podcast in lockdown. We had to quickly come up with a name and a sort of a discipline, a constraint, which was that we were going to only review films on Mubi. We called it MoobTube, and it was spelt in this way with two U's that didn't really make any sense. It became a funny meme. But as we did the podcast, expanded to reviewing all kinds of films and all kinds of directors, we sort of honed in on a particular quality of the way we talk about films, which I think differs from a lot of the other film podcasts and film critics out there. We are because we are filmmakers, we are particularly interested in the construction of film and form, basically looking at films through the way that the formal techniques that they use, the innovations they use. And so BFI Film on Film Festival was a Gloria, even though I'm not a film purist, and as I said, a mushy, dirty print, is not always preferable, in the face of a really pristine 4K DCP. I think quality for me is of prime importance, but certain films really lend themselves to the kind of often kind of rickety vibrancy, the depth of color, the fact that the contrast is just a bit more pronounced and real. We'll get onto NITRATE in a second, but yeah, there are certain qualities to film that, but particularly a quality of this film festival is that we were all suddenly, finally, after 7 years, it feels like, of the culture industry focusing intensively on content. We were focusing on form, undeniably. We were focusing on form, unavoidably. But yeah, let's run through quickly what we saw. So opening, we didn't see everything. There were lots of workshops we didn't go to.
We saw them sort of ambiently humming along in the background. We caught I think a corridor screening of Metropolis, which was quite nice on
like 16 mil. There were lots of really exciting things going on, and lots of people on Twitter have reported all the various. This is not a puff piece for the BFI, as you'll see in a moment. We did have a great time, and we thought it was a fantastic thing for them to do. But yes, we went to the opening night, which was by the BFI's own admission a disappointment, because they were supposed to screen a NITRATE print of Mildred Pierce. Not a film that I think I would have paid to see on regular 35, which it ended up being shown on, not NITRATE. They had an error with the NITRATE projector.
The challenges obviously presented by NITRATE film projection are, manifold. I think that's so. There's a degree of understanding. I mean, that's the thing. So, as Rouben explained on the introduction, when he sort of explained the situation, there are vanishingly few nitrate prints that are suitable for screening. One of the qualities of nitrate film is that it's very subject to shrinkage. Most nitrate films are at least 70 years old. The oldest nitrate films are 120, 130 years old. If they've been improperly stored at any point in their history, they degrade, and it basically means that they will froth and they will shrink. As soon as that begins to happen to a nitrate print, they're pretty much unrecoverable. So a nitrate film already needs to be close to pristine, and kind of, the 4 stages of nitrate print disintegration. As soon as it gets to like stage 2, it's fucked, and you can't screen it because the chance of it just combusting are enormous.
And they said they had 80 nitrate prints in their archives, and they only deemed 8 of them to be suitable for screening.
I imagine,
and they only screened 4. But that was the kind of curatorial decision there.
Yeah, I imagine that's a lot of that has to do with, probably just the kind of potluck of what survived. So, because everything was on, the BFI archive is a, clearinghouse for everything. It will probably be quite humdrum verite films. It will be instructional films. It will be educational films, which wouldn't have been suitable. So imagine from the available feature dramas that they could possibly have screened at the opening night, I suppose something like Mildred Pierce would have been the, it's a well executed, quite beautifully shot melodrama, Hollywood melodrama.
Thriller, yeah.
So I suppose it's slim pickings basically when you go into the world of nitrate. If you're doing if you're doing safety film and you're doing 35 prints, you can pretty much choose anything under God's earth, under God's sun, I suppose.
Yeah, anything that was shot on film and released before before TCPs.
You were listing the films that we saw.
So then on Saturday we went to the experimental program. Oh, yeah. So I'll just list them through, and then we'll start at the beginning.
Yeah.
On Saturday we went to the experimental program, which was called Expanded Cinema and Multi-Projection. Yeah. Programmed by Will Fowler, which was it was just great to see the experimental department of BFI represented, and to have. It was actually only 3 multi-projection films that were projected live, including Threshold by Malcolm Le Grice, which was, I think, in my book, the only truly expanded cinema piece, because it involved like
live mixing,
a live sort of variable. And then on Sunday we saw Blood and Sand
by Rouben
Mamoulian on nitrate, which was a very special experience.
We'll get to that.
Another thing we will touch on as well, it was Casa del Angel.
House of the Angel.
House of the Angel by Leopold Nilsson. Is that his name?
Leopold Torre Nilsson.
Yes,
an Argentine filmmaker, not a Scandinavian filmmaker.
So we're in the funny position of not being able to make that screening because it was
sold out.
It was A, sold out, and B, we have jobs, so we couldn't make it. But yes. So we both watched like a dingy file of that film. Yeah. Which was because it's a great film. It turns out. But
we'll come to that.
We missed on film. But
I feel like spiritually it's part of the program, so we can talk about.
Yeah, it gives us an insight into some of the curatorial choices because, as I say, film is quite easy to see in London. But when you're programming a festival, you have the opportunity to pick certain things that happen to be in the BFI National Archive, but also certain things which happen to enunciate the qualities of film as a medium. Let's begin at the beginning. The opening night, apart from all the various apologies with regards to nitrate, there was something that they were unapologetic about. Which was Mark Jenkin's specially commissioned short, A Dog Called Discord. We've covered Mark Jenkin in our review of Ennis Main. He is a colossal disappointment in as far as his first film was fantastic.
His first feature, Bait,
was absolutely excellent and very deeply invigorating. Deserved all its plaudits. And his second film, Ennis Main, was pathetic.
I mean, he's made things around that. He's made shorts. He's made Bronco's House, which is exists within the same kind of reach wheelhouse as Bait. And I think so. He'd been commissioned by the BFI to make a film with the brief that it had to be shot on film. That is this thing, and that it would in some ways celebrate film itself, and it's the texturality and the materiality of film, and it would kind of reflect on his own kind of indoctrination into the world of celluloid and film.
Indoctrination. Do you mean to use such a strong word?
Yeah, I absolutely do mean it. But, I mean, that's the thing, because as much as I'm a proponent and lover of film, and I think it's very special and magical, I don't necessarily think that there is much to be gained by. We can come to this later, but sort of tying yourself to the mast of film. It's quite anachronistic. It implies that you can't experiment with digital, and it implies that it's basically, the implication is that digital is boring and flat. It often is, but that's because people film unimaginatively with digital, and there's so many ways in which you can fuck with digital, and you can achieve texture and grain. And there's so many modalities of digital. We recently did an episode on mini DV, which is a digital format which is ripe for experimentation.
One of our greatest episodes, but highly recommend listeners return to the episode.
Absolutely. And I think that these episodes will share something spiritual with that, because I think, but anyway, so he'd made his film. I think he was commissioned to do a 3-minute film, a 4-minute film. I think they were trying to be kind on their budget, and or his budget, and he turns up with a 22-minute film. Which I found,
it was meant to be 4 minutes.
Yeah, that's what he said. So, and it was this again, just this very kind of art school A level. It was like foundation year filmmaking in a way, which was very kind of locked into this kind of packed lunchbox, George Orwell, Vickers on Bicycles idea of like England, and it was very tawdry and very, very unimaginative, and had this really dire kind of quite bait, as it were, voiceover, which seemed to mostly reflect on Mark Jenkin, and not on film.
He's no Paul Schofield, is he? His voiceover, it doesn't kind of it's not imbued with any sense of mystery, is it? It doesn't quite have that quality.
It's like it's like a bus conductor is telling you that you're kind of if bus conductors still exist. No, it's like a train conductor asking you for your ticket. That's what it feels like.
I think Mark Jenkin absolutely deserves to have some role within a film.
I wasn't sure how that sentence was going to end.
Because Bait was, I think, a rare example of a contemporary film made on film that absolutely should be made on film. I think at the moment we have...
It earned its chops.
At the moment, Succession, for instance, was shot on film totally unnecessarily. There are various people who I think use it as just a form of elitist...
Wait, Succession was shot on film?
Yeah.
Was it?
Totally unnecessary. Yeah, exactly. That's what everyone says when I say this.
What insane waste of money. Everyone could have been shot on digital.
Exactly. It could have shot on an Arri. But it proves exactly the point we were making on our TV podcast, quoting Pedro Costa's statement about Arri Alexas, and about the fact that, it used to be you had this huge freedom with digital. You could just pick this thing up. You could get it from Argos. You could go and just shoot your mates and make a feature film and you're done. And now there's a form of gatekeeping that's returned, where you need to have all these assistants and extra people on set to kind of make it work. And therefore you may as well shoot on film. So prestige people who, like HBO, who want to feel a bit above the
isn't it so funny that for so many years people were shooting on digital trying to make it look like film, and here are people shooting on film fundamentally trying to make it look like digital?
Exactly. Yeah, the camera work, it's true, the camera work in Succession is most reminiscent of like The Thick of It, which was like a classic kind
British
of
sitcom,
British TV digital, early digital era kind of like mockumentary camcorder vernacular. So yeah, I absolutely agree. And because it's not grainy, it doesn't look like Albert Maysles or something. It doesn't have that kind of like
not all of it was shot with this in this kind of shaky cam shoot from the hip style, which again is reminiscent of digital. I mean, anyway, we're not here to review Succession, but that does surprise me.
But that's what I mean about film's role right now. Is it's sort of a bit of a luxury item, but I thought very highly of Mark Jenkin for his decision to film Bait.
Absolutely.
Using this 16mm technique, developing it with coffee or whatever, making this the extreme grain texture that he created,
and using post-sync sound as well, and basically choosing to dub it, which creates kind of Brechtian alienation effect, really, which is what he was trying to communicate with these clashing of worlds in Bait, between the modern down from London and the kind of the resentment between of local fishermen and
Because I think
in this Cornish town. I think what it also lends is, like, particularly when you see something that's shot with the sea and the coastline, is the film's ability to merge and blur distance. And I think, it's something that really picks up well. It comes back to like Jean Epstein or something. You've got an amazing ability of film to be an abstraction in a way. It's an abstraction from reality. And that's, but again, when you see something like Succession, everything is in perfect focus when it needs to be in perfect focus. It's, none of the qualities of film are being utilized. Complete waste. Shocking.
Because I think film is ultimately, film in 2023, using film in 2023 is ultimately distancing. It ultimately, especially these little colour shots that in Mark Jenkin's film, which is now been made available free on the BFI player if anyone wants to subject themselves to it. These shots of the interior of the BFI, the foyer of the BFI, it's immediately distancing. Because we now have the ability to go to the BFI and just shoot something on our iPhone, which feels much more immediate and quotidian. Film, the grain of film being applied, it has the same effect as something that's had a film effect put on it, because it is novel, it's weird, it's strange, it is distancing, and that distance. And I'm that's not to denigrate film, but the era, the quality of the image, it's like Hito Steele's Poor Image, right? The quality of the image does have this. It does have a historical. It does put a historical landmark on a timestamp on a piece of media. Exactly. And I think using film in 2023, you are creating a distancing effect, but that you have to know that you're doing that, or it has to serve the thing.
I don't see much benefit in shooting the corridors of the BFI in film. But I do see great benefit in shooting, a landscape with great depth on film. Then you can begin to pick up its qualities for abstraction, its painterly qualities, which is maybe something that Michael Snow reached with Regent Central, in 1971, where a landscape begins to break apart under film, these great horizons and distances. But so that's so we were subjected to this
our assessment of Mark Jenkin.
I just think it was a parallel exercise, and because he's like the scion of film in film, shooting on film in the UK, he's the go-to person. There's no one really else, because everyone else producing. He's the mascot
of formalism at the moment. It's a bit
it's a zombie formalism,
but but he basically he'd found this footage of his friend's dog. And he didn't know whether it developed properly or not.
No, he didn't know. He didn't know the dog. So he found a bit of film that his friend gave him, and the dog belonged to someone else or something. I don't know.
But he managed to track down the person whose dog it was. By which point their dog had died, and he showed them the footage, and they were like, "Oh my god, my dog is alive in this footage." It was just like
it was like that Joy Orbison album. People going, "Oh yeah, you going to the shops?"
It was just so inconsequential, I'm afraid to say. But nevertheless,
moving on.
So that evening, we were not best pleased, because we didn't see Nitrate, and we did see something we didn't like. Mildred Pierce was fine, but I wouldn't have chosen to see it.
Let's talk about. So I think,
then on Saturday.
No. Should we talk about Mildred Pierce
briefly?
Let's talk about Mildred Pierce, because I think it's important. It represents a kind of high watermark of Hollywood studio melodrama. I think it was interesting because I was reading the Brady biography of Wells recently.
Orson Welles, yeah.
Yeah, Orson Welles, and not Charlotte Wells. And it's
someone written a biography of the director of After Sun already.
And he remarks on films like Mildred Pierce being films like Citizen Kane making films like Mildred Pierce possible. And I think there is a certain Wellesianism to it. This kind of noirish, kind of like
it's like well lit and like has some good compositions.
Yeah, uses some depth of field that's interesting and has often quite disjointed angles. But the actual film itself is a relatively, actually quite confusing rise and fall film of a restaurateur, and there's some interesting lenses about gendered labour, which I think Michael Curtis was particularly interested in at that moment. I think I was going to say Rita Hayworth. June Crawford, sorry, is
Joan Crawford, yeah.
Joan Crawford is very compelling. It was, I believe the only Oscar that she won in her career for playing Mildred Pierce, and she's very, very compelling, and it is what it is. It's a melodrama. I think there were some moments that were very beautiful. It was kind of quippily written when it needed to be, but as James King, friend of the pod, as they say, was with us, it was obviously a script that had been subject to script doctors, because the moment, most of it was in this kind of archly saccharine melodramatic order, and then you get these very quippy sections. But there was some interesting camera work. But yeah, again, the letdown was that it was not on NITRATE because of a failure of the fire suppression system in the actual projector itself, which is fine. We'll talk about NITRATE in a minute. But yeah, so a film like Mildred Pierce, what can we say about it? It
was pulpy in the sense that it kind of, you felt the sense of unearned manipulation, I suppose. If we agree that all art has an element of like making you feel things that you weren't already feeling, these feelings that it sort of attempted to kind of bring upon you, it just kind of like, it was a bit of a kind of whodunit that sort of changed course in a way. A
few red herrings, and that
felt a bit like we were just being led around like a dog.
This is Michael Curtis, obviously, so of Casablanca fame. So it's not, it's not the go-to. It's almost a B-side to Casablanca. To see, I mean, maybe I would have walked out if they started screening Casablanca, because it's a film I've seen before. So.
The B-side to Casablanca is To Have and Have Not. True. By Howard Hawks, which I saw on film at the BFI just before the Film on Film Festival, and it was very poorly attended. I might say it would have been very well attended had it been part of this festival.
I wonder why they screened they blew their load, and then
they're screening because they constantly screen stuff on 35. It's not unusual.
But where was like
the BFI
did they screen any Cirque?
Did
they screen any Cirque during Film on Film?
Any Cirque?
Yeah,
Douglas Cirque. No.
Huh. John Ford?
No.
They
mostly screened like kind of unusual,
I wonder why.
Also ran Hollywood stuff.
I wonder why that was. Because to watch like How Green Is My Valley or something, or Stagecoach on film would have been like a joyous experience. And then to go for, I'm not here to like
does get screened, and the important thing is it's
the programming
stuff
choices
that was
per se,
at the National Archive. So it's not like a lot of the stuff that gets screened is just like
they weren't hiring it. Basically,
it's just being hired from wherever, right? Some of that stuff has to come from across the pond, whatever.
Anyway,
then so that was Thursday. Then on Friday, we were both, we hadn't booked a ticket and we were both at work. So we couldn't catch the 6 p.m. screening of House of the Angel by Leopold Torres Nilsson. But we did watch a naughty file of it. It's also on YouTube in very, very bad quality. So we felt extraordinary. We were green with envy at all the punters who managed to nab a ticket for that screening. It's a beautiful. It's a 1 hour and 10 minute.
It's like 74 minutes, which is
Argentine thriller.
Yeah,
it has very much ahead of its time, a kind of Alan Rene style, kind of essayistic tracking shots and voiceover memories sort of intro.
Yeah,
and then it settles into a kind of thriller vernacular, but the compositions are still like very deep, well composed, and kind of Wellesian in a
but also with some quite clever camera usage, the twisting of the camera on zoom, or slow kind of twisting of the camera.
Lots of Dutch angles as well, actually.
Yeah, and I think there was a great sense of chiaroscuro. It's a kind of political corruption thriller. I think there's something about House of the Angel which is quite surprising, because it's the first I've heard of it. I've been aware of the name Nilsson for a while, and just haven't ever had a raw. This is always why to distrust blurbs. Often you stumble across the blurb in a year of a film, you're like, I'm pretty sure what this will be. But it is quite a remarkable film, and it has this kind of like, it has this Hiroshima Mon Amour, Last Year at Marienbad energy to its beginning, a sense of kind of decayed time that feels very familiar to like the Nouveau Roman in France, like Duras and Philippe Soler and people like that. There's a sense of Alain Robbe-Grillet, a sense of uncanny, dreamlike, soupy time, which the camera work really kind of bootstraps and aids in this very, very magnetic and beautiful way. And it's a great story of kind of like, it's actually a kind of it does a red herring really well in terms of its kind of supposed kind of hero becoming an anti-hero, this kind of dueling character, a politician who falls from grace. But it's done very artfully. It's done with a great deal of emotion and psychological depth in a way that Mildred Pierce has none. And it's which I think is just like a quality of, House of the Angel feels like a film written by one person, whereas Mildred Pierce feels like a film written by a studio.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So you lose that kind of that kind of all-encompassing membrane of psychological nuance, and it's quite great film. Actually, quite surprising when you I won't spoil it for people because I think it's worth watching. But when you find out about the when you discover the when this kind of reverse happens towards the end of the film, and there's a particular moment that happens, it is quite it's quite surprising. I think actually it caught me off guard, and I think it's very adept, very beautiful film. It's gagging on its knees for a restoration and a good transfer, and presumably if there is a nitrate print of it, there will be 35 prints of it in existence, and so hopefully at some point someone will, cough, Martin Scorsese World Cinema Project will dole out the money, because I think this is very deserving.
Yeah, maybe the BFI. I mean, they've got it in their archive. They could rack it on.
Yeah, I think so.
Blu-ray, maybe.
It was a complete.
Just throwing it out there.
But we didn't see it on film. We didn't see it as part of the festival. But
we know it would have been amazing on film. And many people we spoke to who were at that screening were effusive about its qualities. Exactly. Yeah. Moving on Saturday evening, this was when the heat started to really set in.
Yes.
We were wandering over from a picnic in the Barbican.
Wandering over, we walked for 40 fucking minutes.
40 minutes in the sweating sun. We'd just been socialising with a friend of the pod, Will Pimlott, and his
shout out to Will
and his many compañeros. And we arrived at the BFI. My dear friend Tash was in a bit of a fluster because they were telling her that they wouldn't let anyone in. And I shouted at Owen because I was being harangued by my friend Tash about us not being able to let in, and Owen insisted on going to get a cider from the bar, which of course was totally fine.
Completely within my remit.
And he managed to get in, and the film didn't start for another 5 minutes anyway.
I accept your apology.
I am sorry.
I could tell you were stressed. I could tell you were stressed.
But no, it was fine. We saw 3 very interesting films. The third was more than interesting. It was profound. The first was called The Great Ice Cream Robbery, which was
by James Scott.
And it involved a Klaus Oldenburg exhibition at the Tate Britain. Yeah. Formerly just Tate. And it was double screen work. So the first 2 films were double screen. The second film I'll just describe briefly, Chris Wellesby, Wind Vane, which was 2 cameras in Hampstead Heath where the tripod was loose, and it was just kind of moving with the wind. Left and right.
It would be spinning or turning gently in response to the direction of the wind, so it might capture a tree, the composition meaning. Sometimes the composition would align in a way that would be perfect rule of thirds by chance. And so there's actually something about it which is quite reminiscent. Again, sorry to keep mentioning Michael Snowden every fucking 10 minutes.
The Region Central is very relevant.
It is literally the Region Central, but the Region Hampstead Heath.
I think it was... For some reason, the Region Central, I guess because the compositions are often a bit closer, and the concept is...
It's also more visually interesting, because Hampstead Heath, shot on quite blotchy film stock that was already, I think the quality of that particular print has already merged towards the reds quite a lot already.
I must admit, I was annoyed that I didn't know that it, even though it's called Wind Vane, I didn't know that that's why the cameras were moving left and right.
Yeah, it took Emily mentioned that to me. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
I felt like, we both found this out after the film. We'd watched the film, and I think at the time I was a bit like there was this lack of purpose to the compositions, which irritated me. And then when I discovered that there was this conceptual basis behind it, I was like, okay, maybe I would have
now this is interesting.
Maybe I would have felt that, but also maybe that's stupid, and that doesn't actually, because ultimately Le Region Central isn't buttressed by the kind of like automaton conceit under which it was made.
Yeah.
Like aesthetically, it isn't buttressed by that. It's buttressed by like
the balletic camera work.
The balletic camera work, which is a result of a technique. But that technique, it's a bit like when people talk about AI art or whatever. A human still decided to make the camera do that weird thing, and therefore, like that's where its beauty comes from. Whereas I felt like there was a little bit less variable, a little bit less of the human variable in this composition, but it was still
a nice
like
exercise. It feels very London Filmmakers Co-op. You know, it's just like, oh, that's nice.
It was very good programming on behalf of the BFI and on behalf of Will Fowler, because it was like a beautiful illustration of a very simple and beautiful illustration of double camera, of like dual channel 16mm.
But I mean, to go back to great. I said Great Train Robbery, the Great Ice Cream Robbery. This is James Scott, who is still very much with us. English filmmaker. He's has made a name for himself with artistic documentaries, and he's made a documentary about what the fuck, David Hockney. There we go. About David Hockney, and he's
great noises he made there.
Yeah, I really did. My brain was buffering in the heat. So this film is a portrait of Klaus Oldenburg, about the show, about the preparation for the show, also about Oldenburg's methodology, I suppose. So there's a bit of a red herring with the title of the film, The Great Ice Cream Robbery. Very briefly in the film, we see some sort of frenetic police activity. Bobby's basically doing something with a sort of ice cream stand, and it's kind of unclear exactly what's going on. Like either they've impounded the ice cream stand because they've been selling ice creams illegally, or because some sort of ice cream robbery has happened. And obviously Klaus Oldenburg's whole thing was exaggerating the material culture of everyday life, pop culture, like making a giant inflatable burger, this kind of thing. So I think there's a sense of using this particular slice of life, exaggerating it to the entire film, and then kind of ignoring it, and then making the rest of the film about this portrait of Klaus Oldenburg. Maybe there are moments where this dual channel works quite nicely. There's moments of parallel editing between these shooting legs of women in the street, and I can well imagine it's like Oxford Street or something. I imagine sort of busy, or Carnaby Street, and then you've got this. He's Oldenburg's obsessed with these smokestacks from factories, and you've got this kind of nice parallelism between the smokestacks and the legs of these women.
And his sculptures, yeah.
And his sculptures,
There's also like footage of, was it his Hannah Wilke, his girlfriend, kind of changing dresses in a hedge or something.
Was that his girlfriend?
I think so, yeah.
Klaus, you old dog.
I might be incorrect. Okay, but I mean, just the male gaze on display in quite a beautifully unleashed and
great ice
unthreatening fashion. Exactly. Yeah. But yes, no, I enjoyed this. I thought it was a bit baggy in places.
Like half an hour long. Or so.
Maybe if I'd known it was half an hour long, I would have just let myself go into it a bit. But I guess I looked over at the projectors, which was sort of almost like a Netflix progress bar in a way. I could see the levels of celluloid going down on the first reel.
That's interesting.
It was good. And full of, and also interestingly, because the two projectors were physically separate, which makes it different from a film like Vortex, for instance, which was this dual channel Gaspar Noé film about dementia, which is obviously digital, so you have absolute control over the synchronicity, and the scenes are very often like shot in the same room. This was like two different bits of footage, sometimes in the same room, sometimes not, sometimes on, sometimes off, and they were kind of talking to each other, but the way they were talking to each other was almost as if like a live band was there. There was like this.
It's like a call and response.
Yeah, there was this slight disconnect because the projectors were literally in the room projecting it differently. And like say, it wasn't totally like nothing.
And actually, it's interesting. You'd see there's a moment where we have both cameras shooting in the same room, and they're shooting during the build and assembly of this exhibition. And, Klaus Oldenburg's going up a ladder and trying to arrange one of his sculptures on the wall, and you can see, so you're seeing the same action from two cameras, which are, probably...
But it's slightly out of time,
15 meters apart from each other. Probably 10 meters apart from the top, 5-10 meters. And yeah, so slightly out of time with each other. And you also appreciate the color difference. The lighting in that space is the same, the colors in the room are the same, the people are the same, but you can appreciate then the slight difference in color quality of the two stocks, the two reels you're seeing. And you think maybe that's down to one of them is better preserved than the other, or maybe one of them was shot on a slightly different stock, or maybe one of them was shot on a slightly different camera. And that moment invited lots of reflections about film's materiality. I think it was quite nice that.
Yeah, that was I mean, there were lots of nice. I mean, I just love dual channel as a format.
It's great.
I mean, that's where I loved Warsex so much, because
You've made dual channel films before, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yeah. No, I find it to be exhilarating and underused as a technique, because it basically gives the viewer this crazy agency where you sort of get to like choose what you concentrate on.
Well, it's what Wells said about theatre. You know, there isn't a singular eye. There's a kind of, multiple eyes and multiple lenses and angles on a scene.
So you get to create two things at once. Well, three things at once. You get to create like film number 1, which is the film on the left, film number 2, which is the film on the right, and then film number 3, which is like this composition that of the two that feels sometimes coincidentally and sometimes very deliberately juxtaposed, like they feel like part of each other sometimes. So that was a very good aspect of that. Obviously less so with the Chris Brosby film, because that was sort of accidental, although they were just in the same location, so it was just a single concept thing. But let's talk now about a 3-channel work that was not only a 3-channel work, it was also a piece of genuine expanded cinema performance by the great
Malcolm Le Grice.
This was actually performed by his son, Oliver Le Grice. It was a piece called Threshold, which I think this was actually only the second time ever that it had been performed. The first time it had been performed many decades ago by Le Grice Jr.
So apparently there's a 4-screen version of this.
Oh, really?
Did we see the 3 or 4?
There were 3 projectors.
So there's a 4-screen version of this. So with Threshold, it's using film stock, and it feels like what initially would be a flicker film or pulse film. So in the kind of Kubelka, Tony Conrad trajectory of post-war avant-garde filmmaking, overlapping boxes of color. And the element of mixology that happens is that these projections sometimes overlap, so you get a kind of raw superimposition. Sometimes they split apart, and as we progress through the film, an actual naturalistic scene is introduced, and the naturalistic scene is sort of I believe like the doorway, like the entranceway into a nightclub or a restaurant with kind of men in coats. And so we're continually moving towards this entranceway. And then there's this kind of like graphic sort of series of concentric rings, pulsating concentric rings that are introduced. And what happens is that the film reaches this fever pitch where these layers are superimposed on each other, vibrating, pulsing, creating kind of strange formations and crystallizations over the top of each other as they kind of overlap and pulsate, and it becomes very hypnotic. And you also obviously have the audio track as well, so as the tape is passing over the audio head, the tape head, sorry, you're getting bits of repetitious sound, these kind of vroom, vroom, and you get these interesting bits of dialogue that clip in, which we all interpreted as it was kind of like a blue dress, gold dress moments.
Yanni Laurel style kind of.
Yanni Laurel, it kind of was. I thought it was saying it's mid.
I thought it was saying Mizzy, referring to the TikTok prankster. Obviously, I didn't actually think that it was referring to that.
But that's how the ear interpreted
time travel.
It shows there are different outlooks on the world. You're obsessed with Mizzy. I'm just going it's mid. But it's it's extraordinary. It's a really extraordinary piece of film. We're watching it kind of now, obviously on a digital single channel format.
Even the rhythm of those noises, which I think reflects the multiple.
Can the listeners hear this?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Even these kind of weird jolts of sound, you get the sense of these different things overlaying. But yeah, basically what Le Grice was doing, Le Grice Jr., he was directing the two projectionists and himself to move these squares or these Academy ratio boxes of color around each other, using the lens to kind of expand and contract the size of these boxes to communicate. To
It's cellular almost. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
watching something under a microscope, I suppose.
It looked very similar to the film on film. It wasn't the same as, but it looks very similar to the BFI film on film branding,
Yeah.
which involves these kind of three
These boxes. It kind of reminds you
boxes.
of like Owen Land or someone like that,
Mhm.
you know, who actually used audio in a really interesting way, because he would, you can kind of sculpt on film stock in such a way that when it passes over the tape head, a particular shape or image on the stock will register as a sound. And that's kind of what Owen Land did. And there's very interesting things you can do with that in terms of, he did one with letters and numbers, if I remember properly. I can't remember. And they've always been performed kind of, historically live. But yeah, I think it was a really transformative filmic experience. It's a 17-minute long film, which has a kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, it reaches this kind of crescendo, this fever pitch. And I've actually just checked details. So what I thought was a restaurant is actually border guards at a frontier post.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was way off. But again, you're seeing these kind of really blurry, fuzzy, quickly pulsating images.
I feel like expanded cinema, or like experiments with experimental film and the materiality of film, not just the materiality of film, but to update it to digital, which is like immaterial in a certain sense, the form of film just as an experience unfolding in time, structural film basically. We don't like these events don't happen in London nearly enough, and I just feel a bit nostalgic for like 10 years ago when I was 18 and I would go to the BFI, and it wouldn't be uncommon for like there to be a funny Malcolm Le Grice performance or something, and I feel like now that doesn't happen very often.
I guess it speaks to that kind of wider kind of dearth of repertory screenings in the UK, and places that will screen kind of avant-garde film. We don't have an anthology film archives in London.
Well, we do. We have Lux, but they just they choose not to screen formally interesting stuff anymore. They choose
that's what I mean.
They choose to screen stuff that conforms not commercially, but conforms to the the art world's current trends of identity politics, rather than really truly innovating in form. But there we are. This is all a step in the right direction from the BFI.
Yeah, it really is. We're really bullish for this. So let's move on to before the Benadryl really kicks in. I've taken and I fall asleep. Let's move on to the kind of final film, I suppose, we saw as part of the screening, which is Rouben Mamoulian's Blood and Sand from 1941. It is a technicolor masterpiece in its own right. The crucial thing about it is it was also a successful NITRATE screening.
Yes. One of three that happened on Sunday.
Yeah, one of three that happened on Sunday, so they really hit their stride. Whatever fire suppression issues were happening on Thursday night were, absolved. No one needs to commit seppuku. It's fine. We've kind of managed to sidestep that. And I think one of the amazing things about it is that I think the difference between this and Mildred Pierce is that Mamoulian, unlike Curtis, Mamoulian was, a true a visionary in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And operating within the same kind of studio system, but I think Mamoulian was not tethered to, even though in a lot of senses this is a melodrama, is a romantic melodrama, but he understood the kind of nuance of that. And
also like the classical high point of Mamoulian's career was in the early 30s at the dawn of the talkies. He made Jekyll and Hyde, he made City Streets, he made I can't remember the name of it, but that film which has love in the title, that's set in Paris, that has the funniest kind of symphony at the start. It was a musical. So Mamoulian, we talk in detail about him on our 1930s podcast.
Yeah.
Our sort of talkies, Advent of the Talkies podcast with guest Eugene Kochelenko. So please tune into that. But yeah, Mamoulian was a real innovator, and
Love Me Tonight.
Love Me Tonight. That's
the
it.
film from 1932. Yeah.
Blood and Sand is no exception in a certain sense. I mean, there's a great shot with like a fountain, like a romance with shot through a fountain in the foreground. You know, it's not. It reminded me a bit of East of Eden, right? It's like a kind of technicolor wonder. You know, it's kind of luxuriating in the color.
It's a Sunday flick,
and it's full of quite deep and powerful romance. There's a sort of moral lesson about how fame never lasts. You know, the plot is about a kind of bullfighting, and about
it's also a rise and fall, and you do you know, in a way that the modality, and again to mention someone like even to mention Wells again, and to mention Curtis again, these are all films happening in the 1940s about the sort of rise, the peak and the fall of a figure, you know, be it a newspaperman, be it a restaurateur, or be it a bullfighter, which is the case here, played by Tyrone Power. And I think, you know, Tyrone Power is one of those funny characters because Tyrone Power is always Tyrone Power in a film.
I don't think I've ever seen Tyrone Power.
He was such a, like, he was, he just shit like this. Tyrone Power was in a robes. He was in a lot of like sword and sandals epics.
He looks a bit like Ben Shapiro.
He does got a little bit like Ben Shapiro. He, you know, had these kind of boyish good looks. He had this kind of clean-cut American accent in a way that, you know, is obviously quite unintentionally alienating, distancing in a film that's set in Spain when other characters are making their best effort to sound sort of Spanish. They're sort of Spanglishing themselves. I think, but, you know, I actually to talk about how the look of the film, it has an enormous sense of depth field. The nitrate, and again, I don't really have a point of reference because I haven't seen it on safety film. I haven't seen it on digital, and I kind of want to.
And we also neither of us have ever seen anything else on nitrate.
No, so this is our one experience. But there was and again, is this a placebo effect? I don't know, but there was a real sense of lustrousness and pearlescence to the quality of the film. And actually, what I was expecting from a Technicolor stock, and the way you see Technicolor transferred, is in this kind of really Wizard of Oz uber poppy, almost poster paint style of color, and you actually come to associate Technicolor with something that's quite in a way quite shallow. It's poppy but shallow, very superficial, but actually there were extraordinary depths. And I think the way I was thinking about it to myself afterwards was like, it's a difference between poster paint and oils, and this was a film shot in oil. There are great darknesses about it, you know. So at the beginning of the film, our character, our young Juan Gallardo, our young kind of bullfighter, is a kind of a spunky lad, and his father was a famous bullfighter who was gored by a bull, fatally died, and he wants to go into the same thing, and he has a very despairing mother. You know, he's like doesn't want young Mizzy to go outside and play with the bulls, and he's got this great sense of kind of like, you know, energy and cheeky charm. Yeah. And there's a great scene where he kind of runs off in the night and goes to fight a bull in this ring. And that moment is shot with such weird, almost unheimlich depth, as he's tussling this bull, shot in this long shot. It's not shot close up because obviously no cameraman's going to go and sit in this bull ring for love or money. And it's shot in this kind of murky darkness, which is evocative of like Goya almost, you know, real
and this
darknesses and depths.
Goya was in fact a reference point. So then again, is it the nitrate or is it Mamoulian's extraordinary visual sensibility? But like Goya was like a massive reference. Lots of Spanish painters were, but like he was literally
Velázquez.
He was literally like painting shadows onto the set, like instead of having like actual shadows. He was doing a bit like Antonioni with Red Desert. Like he was doing these crazy things with the set design.
He was engineering
engineer like a very exactly as you say, unheimlich experience.
You see, there's certain scenes which, again, it kind of brings to mind like Godard's Passion, where you see scenes that it's painterly in its everyday shots, but there are certain scenes which really feel like now you're looking at a kind of tableau vivant based on a painting, you know, particularly scenes shot in churches and chapels, because you can really use light in an extraordinary way in those spaces in Churrasco, particularly when the bullfighters are doing their kind of ritualistic pre-fight prayer session. And those scenes are shot with such magnificent sense of composition. They do look like fucking paintings when you see them. They are extraordinarily soft, and there's a way in which, again, I don't know if this is a nitrate, I don't know if it's Mamoulian, but it felt like it was a nitrate. These characters kind of it's almost 3D. They kind of almost pop out from the screen a little bit.
This was a comment that Kevin Brownlow made in. It was a quote from Sight and Sound, I think, but it was used in the NITRATE publicity that BFI provided.
Yeah,
where he said he was at some screening where they switched from like a duplicate 35 safety film to original NITRATE, and he said it was like night and day, stereoscopic.
I can actually, I think I sent you that quote, didn't I? I think I can actually read it. So yeah, it's Kevin Brownlow saying,
a legend of film preservation.
And he's saying, I remember at the National Film Theatre showing a dim 16mm dupe of a Colleen Moore comedy called Orchids and Ermine from 1927. It was a usual thing that laboratories subjected us to in the 1960s. Then the projectionist switched over to the same scene in original NITRATE. The audience gasped. The difference was indeed breathtaking. The 16mm barely registered. The 35mm looked stereoscopic. You felt like you could walk into it. And I think that does explain what you feel like with these films, like the sense of actual kind of real physical depth to them that at once feels so real and so hyper real as to be fake at the same time is extraordinary. And I think, Blood and Sand even, which is like, it's like watching Ben-Hur or something. It's just, it's a perfectly jolly romp in a lot of ways. It plays itself, it's funny, it's sad, it's exciting. In all the perfect ways, in a lot of ways it's what kind of like Hollywood films should be doing, striving for now. Hollywood's done it before. It's it's a populist film that is actually also a work of art.
It was funny to me, like, because I suppose it did slightly remind me of seeing films on 3D, but the problem with films on 3D is that you're wearing the glasses and they're so dim, so there's none of the brightness. But like so to describe to listeners, most of whom probably won't have ever experienced NITRATE in a film because it's such a rare experience, and we experienced it in this very we nearly didn't experience it at all. Had the projector not
we
been
could have
fixed.
died, listeners,
or we could have just died and taken the experience to our graves. But the quality, there is a certain depth. You sort of feel like you could move around what's being projected to you. Yeah. But obviously, just as with 3D cinema, you can't move. And there were actually some 3D 35mm screenings, which I wasn't really moved to book tickets for, but it would have been interesting to just sample that as a technique. But NITRATE certainly has a kind of a 3D quality. Certainly has much greater depth than regular 35, and I think it's something to do with the way that the highlights jump out. So when there is kind of sunlight in a scene
or a fire,
it does just like shimmer that little bit more. There's this, maybe it's a bit like OLED or something like that level of contrast where the blacks, they're not totally black in the way that OLED is. Like they're not like, it's not a completely
kind of greyish and
it's
brown,
not a completely 0-to-1 ratio, but like there is like a real shimmering and something a bit silvery as well. It's quite unusual. Like it's not necessarily the experience I would want for every film that I watch. No. Obviously not like digital films. That would be that could be kind of interesting to watch, like a digital film transferred to NITRATE. I wonder if it would have the same.
I wonder. I mean,
because you're not working.
I mean, the obvious is, the
depth of field is different, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the obvious thing is that, like, a lot of this film was mostly shot in interior locations. I wonder what NITRATE.
It's very controlled. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what NITRATE would look like with a landscape or an exterior. There were certain scenes that were shot in Mexico City, which are outside, and you can kind of tell these scenes, but they're very few and far between. The vast majority was shot interiors on these sound stages. Again, you mentioned like the silver NITRATE. I think people say that's what adds this kind of this sparkle to the certain highlights and contrasts. And I think, maybe that's what it is. Obviously there is also a real sense of like beautiful ugliness to it. When you see Rita Hayworth's face.
Sorry about all the noise. If people can hear kids playing outside, that's because they are.
We apologise for the.
It's quite a sudden intrusion.
But hopefully
we'll be
calling the council.
Hopefully the polar pattern of the mic is not accentuating it too much.
And so what you have is like talking about the perils of shooting outside. You have these. I've lost my train of thought.
The silveriness of NITRATE.
Yeah, so you've got this suspend the kind of wash that is applied to the film stock is, it's this nitrate suspended solution. And I wonder, part of me wonders if that's what adds this kind of glimmer and gleam to what you see. And so, when you see Rita Hayworth's face, at first, there's almost this like strange alienness to it. It's supposed to be a scene where we're supposed to recognize how beautiful Rita Hayworth is. And this was the film that really made Rita Hayworth. Like, this really, really made her. And there is a sense where she's extraordinarily beautiful, but also kind of like godlike and untouchable. All of the characters, and also his actual wife, his wifey, as it were, who's the actress's name, I forget. I can easily look it up. But again, when you see her, you get this real sparkle in her eyes, this gossamer shimmer to her skin, which you do not see in digital. You cannot reproduce that in digital. The experience is very holy. It's like looking at an icon. It's like being before, a Bellini altarpiece in a church. There's something very transformative about it. Which is in effect a condition you just simply cannot reproduce with digital, because digital is too much of a sponge. It picks too much up. It's too precise. It doesn't,
and it also doesn't have that kind of contrast and dynamic range.
Yeah.
What should we learn? This brings us on to the conclusion.
Yeah.
What should we learn from this film on Film Festival? Because nitrate is basically over. I mean, when we're in our 60s. None of these prints will be. It won't be possible to see anything on nitrate, because all of these prints would have degraded to the point where they're a kind of an unspeakable virus.
People might transfer to other nitrate.
There doesn't seem to be any sign that anyone's like creating a nitrate safe cinema or like.
Oh, specifically for nitrate.
Yeah, and no one's like transfer. Like no one who's shooting on film now is like making nitrate transfers of their films.
It's too dangerous. It's too unstable.
So it's basically a technology that's nearly completely extinct.
Yeah, we're seeing it on its last legs. I mean,
so what do we learn technologically from seeing it? Is it even just like a complete novelty at this point?
No, I would go back, because I think that there's something very, so nitrate for half of film's life, so the half-life of cinema, right, was dominated by nitrate. This was the predominant mode of filmmaking up until the 40s and 50s. And it's funny, the BFI had a nitrate fire in the 60s. I think 67 or 70 or something. So they've had experience of having a nitrate fire before. It was relatively quickly put out. A lot of the legislation about controlling nitrate stocks and moving to safety film happened at the turn of the century. Notoriously, because there's a bit backstory here, but it's interesting. There was a major fire in 1897 in Paris Bazaar, where like 126 people died because funny. So when you read back, there was a screening in this kind of like a lot of the time, at that time in the 1890s, film was a novelty. It wasn't shown as film wasn't really a thing. It was like a kind of fun diversion, where the fun fair, and there was this kind of medieval town or something that they'd built at the Paris Bazaar, and it was screening some some film about something like a tennis match or something. And so people gathered there amongst all these other diversions that were on for the day. I imagine like a sort of woman with a beard and a dwarf or something, and then maybe a bit of film, which goes to show how far it's come. There's this moment where they're in the projection booth and they're trying to change reels, nitrate reels, and so the projectionist's is kind of fumbling, and he's trying to sort it out because it's quite dark in there. So absolutely fucking doofus next to him lights a match to help him see, and obviously the rest is history. A huge conflagration, 126 people died. This stuff burns at like 4,400 degrees
because it provides its own oxygen.
Yeah, and it will
when it burns, it creates more oxygen so the fire just accelerates.
One of the accelerants of fire is oxygen. And it burns the entire place down. 126 people die. 2,000 people, suffer injuries from, smoke inhalation. And then after that, across America, France, there's this as cinemas expand and more are built, and safety protocols aren't properly watched, you get a spate of fires, and none are as fatal as the Paris Bazaar fire. But people are wounded, people are injured. There are panics. There's kind of moral panics about film. There's a point where people are like, is film done? Because people are scared about going into cinemas again. And so I think when we evaluate, and obviously that didn't happen because legislation was passed in 1907 in the UK where, certain safety protocols had to be watched, and people began to develop safety film, which was at first acetate, and then it was something else, and then it was acetate, which is, a safe, it doesn't really burn form of film stock.
Mhm.
And so things change, but it is so hardwired and baked into the kind of early development of film. I would hope that people would kind of like find the means to preserve it. BFI have a facility in Warwickshire where they store all of their film.
Mhm.
It's off-site, and there's a very controlled process for how nitrate film is handled, which means it has to be warmed up to room temperature for 24 hours and then processed, and there's all these steps. But again, can something like that survive? But I think that the experience of watching nitrate was so, and I love film like we both do, so of course we're going to get more out of it, but I feel like there's something there that someone who'd never thought about how a film is shot before would have like a ecstatic, almost euphoric, holy experience before that. It really did feel special. So yeah, I hope that will continue. I hope that there will be somewhere that will continue to preserve.
And also, I think
the
festival as a whole just obviously attuned everyone to the formal experience in a way that festivals that privilege content or like strands that privilege the content over the form don't. So it was just really nice to have an event that was like, yes, film is a medium and we're taking it seriously.
But what is the future of people shooting on film, do you think? Because of the costs, like just regular film, it's just like safety film and 16mm, because it's...
I think it's kind of dumb, really. I wouldn't do it. I don't do it. I don't shoot on film. It costs a lot.
Yeah.
So I would be just almost as happy with like a festival for stuff shot on iPhones. I just want people to pay some attention to like how things are made.
Where's the DV?
The festival for like festival for stuff that is made on the smallest cameras possible. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm interested in anything that talks about the construction of stuff. Film, like, there's a festival, a slow film festival. There are like ways of bringing this stuff into focus. So, I'm personally, I don't use film to make my films. I can't really imagine, even if I had a fairly big budget, I can't really imagine wanting to, because it's just an extra thing.
I don't think you should have to, in the same way that there's a reason that impasto and gouache and oil paints kind of fall out of usage, because they're expensive, they're difficult. There are other mediums to explore in the art world.
I think it's quite a good archiving format.
Yeah, it's a great archiving format. But the culture of film won't progress if people just adhere to what we did at the beginning because of nostalgic reasons. The only way film is going to progress, I'm not saying the solution to film is necessarily 3D and 4D, but it is about what can be done with the medium that is completely common now. What is the standard medium of shooting? Because Mamoulian wasn't shooting on nitrate because nitrate was special. He was shooting on nitrate because that was just a film stock that you shot on. For him, that was a cutting edge film.
Yeah.
And Stan Brakhage was shooting on 35 and 16mm when his shit burnt or stolen. Sorry. Was shooting on film because that was the medium that was available then. He could afford. And the same goes for Alonso shooting. So all these filmmakers are interesting. And Pedro Costa, when people are making decisions, they're trying to shoot in a relatively modern way. And if people are using film, I think. Yeah, more force to them, but
every so often, like a film like Bait comes along, which absolutely earns its
as it stripes,
its celluloid form. But I would say that film is increasingly like a marginal. I think the fact that you have to have a festival about celluloid, and the fact that all these people were kind of lining up to see films primarily because they're on film rather than necessarily because of the films themselves shows that it is a margin, is now like solidly a marginal medium.
Yeah, because people won't have like a habitual everyday experience with it. So one of the things that Mark Jenkin said in his film, even though we panned it, he said that he had an early formative experience of watching a film projection in a village hall somewhere in Cornwall when he was a kid, which I guess was quite normal whenever he was born. 1847.
Then he tries to find the print in the National Archive. This is just bollocks. You saw a film, like film is like cinema, whether it's digital or film, is fantastic. That's why we all have a podcast about it and love it and make it. It's not that just that's just your nostalgia. That's just like I feel that way when I see like the the kind of seating pattern, the moquette fabric on an old district line train. Like the way he was talking about film was just utter nostalgism. It had nothing to do with the substance of it. I appreciate he's managed to use film in a way that is evocative, and as we said earlier, like it is appropriate to the subject matter sometimes. But yeah, this feeling that is created for him by an experience with film, I don't really recognize that.
Well, even when you take people like Jonas Mikas, Mikas shot on Bolex for much of his career, but when DV formats became more common and when camcorder came on common, he shot on those because he wasn't wedded to Bolex. It was just what he could afford when he was a literal displaced person from Lithuania.
It's true, but I am going to massively contradict myself and say that Mekas's films after he stopped using film,
they are pretty dog shit.
They just look horrible.
They do look horrible.
And I think Mekas weirdly, and this gives some insight into the sort of the funny quirk of like Jonas Mekas as an artist is like, these films are not like his motor, his energy for documenting things didn't seem to kind of really recognize the qualities of film.
I don't think he.
Like he had exactly the same joy, like going for brunch in 2004 with Hans Ulrich Obrist, and just like fucking filming him, like almost like it was a fucking news of the world scoop, the fake shake.
Fake shake was very fake shake. That's the thing. I don't think he understood how to use DV and digital in a way that but maybe
he didn't realize that those images didn't have the same dynamism as like Walden. That all the images in Walden.
You can't compare them to Walden.
As I moved forward
to sketches,
which is fine, but like, I think that you can shoot something fairly banal on film and it looks kind of extraordinary.
That's why we should mistrust it maybe a little bit.
Whereas I think on digital, you do have to work a bit harder to create that, like those effects with light.
Take it back to like Pedro Costa actually, because Pedro Costa is someone who used DV in a way that I think to use that kind of poster paint and oil paint comparison, discovered a kind of oil painting within digital film, and often quite low quality digital film. And I think that, like I said at the very beginning of the episode, there are so many ways you can push digital film to interesting. It's more of a challenge to find the grain and the tear and the rip and the imprecision in digital film, and that's why it's quite exciting. You look at filmmakers like Stom Sogo, R.I.P.
But he was shooting 16mm on VHS, right?
Yeah, but he was finding a kind of an interface between both. He didn't always do that, but he'd use this rephotography approach, which I find really insightful in my practice when I make films, which is rephotography, but I'm doing rephotography of digital on digital. But I think there's a lot of ways where you can push digital to its limits, and you can discover all those things we like about Mark Jenkin likes about film, which is the grain and the buzz and the fuzz and the scratches. You can discover those things in digital. They're not scratches, they're not grain, they're something else. They're pixelation, they're motion blur. There are all these things that you can use to disarticulate kind of normative, realistic, habitual ways of seeing the world. And I think that's the exciting thing about film. So
that's the exciting thing about the Film on Film Festival. For us, it was not so much film itself, but form. And that's why we command you to return to form.
Return to form. Can I tell you
one more? Which is the title of our podcast. Go on.
Because I've been doing a lot of research, so my favourite little anecdote about... so the Royal Navy in 1947, 1948 made a structural film. Did you know this?
No.
So they made a film called, which is a film about the proper... Because obviously the Royal Navy had a film unit, to train, educate, and do ideology. And they made a film called I think the actual title is like, this film is dangerous, and it's nitrate. And it's a nitrate film about the dangers of handling nitrate. Oh, wow. So it's a film which within its title is talking about the specific film itself that is being screened, and as a reminder, it's almost like a structural film within the context of projection itself. I've seen it. It's on YouTube in a really terrible rip.
Very appropriate.
But yeah, so the
dangerously bad quality.
Yeah, dangerously bad quality. So who knew it that the Royal Navy made a structural film?
Makes sense. I mean, all CCTV is in a sense structural film.
Yeah. All right, Bazaar.
Thank you for listening, listeners. We will will
We'll meet again.
We will meet again
where,
on our
don't know
next
when.
episode. We have various things we want to discuss as usual. What's at the top of our list?
I mean, we had this little dalliance with. I want to see what is there with Leopold Torre Nilsson.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. There are certain things I want to chase down.
Summer is an absolute desert in terms of decent films. All the art house stuff from Cannes won't come out.
I think we
autumn.
might need to look back. I think we might need to look back at a kind of like, some forgotten. Mm-hmm. Or a period forgotten. Or if anyone's obviously got any suggestions about what we should look at,
and we might bust out a classic, just a Bresson or something. Right?
We have talked about doing Bresson. We have talked about doing Tarkovsky.
And also, God willing, our appearance on Tank TV, talking about Faithless by Liv Ullmann, will drop.
Which might have come out by the time this is released.
May well
maybe
not.
not.
We sat down in their green screen studio and nattered for a bit.
So you'll get the for the true parasocial relationship. You're going to get us.
You get to see us.
You get to see us,
not just hear us.
Admin reveal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On that note, good night.